Hey, and welcome to the Inclusive Networker podcast, where we make network marketers, small business owners, and solopreneurs aware of blind spots that could be keeping their networks and businesses small. We give them tips and simple, practical tools to make their businesses more inclusive, and we teach our listeners how to build inclusive communities that support diverse customers, team members, and business partners. So, if you want to authentically build relationships with diverse communities of customers or business partners, you are in the right place. But be warned, you will be challenged, but here's the thing, you won't be judged. I'm your host, Dr. Raymona. I'm a speaker, coach, consultant, public health professor, wife, mom, and a fierce challenger of broken systems that keep people from reaching their highest potential. I'm so excited to be with you on your journey to becoming an inclusive networker. Let's jump right in.
So who are we calling into conversation today? Well, we have Beth Ruffin, and I am so very excited to have you here today, Beth. And so let me tell you all a little bit about Beth. So she is a leader, educator, author, TEDx speaker, and cultural disruptor. She is the CEO of the Everyday Inclusionist, a boutique consulting firm focused on teaching leaders how to include themselves and others. She spent 20 years in corporate America before realizing her dream of entrepreneurship. Committed to making our world more inclusive, Beth is the host of the You Belong Here with Beth Ruffin podcast, focused on helping women realize their true potential. Beth is also a published author. Her first book, Get Up, details her journey to self-acceptance. Her second book, You Belong Here, explores the topic of self-inclusion. She is the chair of the Women's Rights and Empowerment Network Board of Directors and co-chair of the Economic Impact Committee of the Richland County Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Phi Soror Incorporated.
All right.
Beth lives in South Carolina with her daughter and cat. So, Beth, welcome to the Inclusive Networker podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's just jump right in.
Okay.
So the first thing that I'll ask you is tell us about your business, or what is the main problem that you solve for your particular customers or clients?
Yeah, my customers are organizational leaders, and the main thing I solve for them is they know that they want to build a more inclusive work environment. They know that they want to have more diversity and be more equitable. They just don't know how to take those steps. And so we go in and we give them actionable, implementable steps that they can follow to become more diverse, equitable, and inclusive.
I love that. So as we think about what you do, right? So a lot of times people are very new to this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's like, what are these terms? How do we even get started with this, as you just said? And so when we think about the inclusive networker, tell us what your thoughts are about what is inclusion and what would you say are the characteristics of an inclusive networker?
I love that you asked this question because I'm actually obsessed with inclusion. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. And so just to kind of clarify, people often talk about diversity and inclusion like they're the same things, but they're not. So I like to say that diversity is a fact, and it simply means all of the ways that we are different. If you have two people in a room, you have diversity, right? But inclusion is a feeling. It's a behavior. And inclusion says you can be uniquely who you are and you can still belong. And I love that. I'm obsessed with that because I came from an industry where not a lot of people look like me. And so I want people who look like me to feel like they belong and thrive wherever they go. So when I think about an inclusive networker, I think about someone who values and celebrates all of the ways that we are different as you are building your network, not just a tolerance, but really a value and a celebration.
I love that. And so when we think about tolerance, That's good. So when we think about the difference between tolerance and really being inclusive and valuing that difference, tell us a little bit about the difference between those two things and maybe an example of what we might see when someone is just being tolerant versus truly being inclusive, because I think that's such a good point. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think about the first thing that came to mind is the LGBTQ community, right? Mm-hmm. And so I may have an organization that says, well, yeah, I mean, we have employees, right, who are part of that community, and we don't mind, right, that they're here, but they're not doing anything to celebrate. So they're not celebrating Pride, or they're not giving benefits, right, spousal benefits. And so when I think about you have an organization, how are you actually saying, I see you and I celebrate you because you are different?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so when a person or an organization, and let's even think towards network marketers and people who have smaller businesses as well. So when they are just being tolerant, they say, yes, you're here. Yes, you're helping us make money, but I'm not going to do anything extra.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I'm sorry.
No, unpack that.
Okay. I was going to say, so, you know, there was this discussion maybe a year or two ago with the ideal client, right? And so when we first started our businesses, you know, the first thing you learn is build your ideal client, right? I had a poster on my wall. I had a woman, I had her name, I had all of these things, right? But oftentimes our ideal clients still look like us. And so what is inclusive is, how do you have an ideal community avatar, right? How can you say, okay, I understand that my customers, my communities are going to look like A, B, C, D, and E, not just A. And so I know that I'm going to have to talk to audience A different than I'm going to have to talk to audience B. And I know that audience E has different values than audience C, right? But it's still my community. And so really moving away from that, just kind of thinking of our customer as one person and thinking more about what does that community of people look like?
Okay. And so what I call this is the thriving network, right? Same concept as what you're saying. So not the ideal client. And this is so good because people are so stuck on that idea of the ideal client. And when we think about network marketing, for sure, people want to duplicate, and they are like, I'm going out there looking for me. I want to duplicate me. And then we see that everybody on the team looks like the original person that started the process.
That's right.
And then there's no diversity of thought. There's no diversity of, look, nothing. And so, so this is really good for our inclusive network audience. So let's talk about this a little bit more. And so when you think about how a leader might develop that thriving network or the more expanded version of the ideal client, what is it that we do? Is it that we think about how we would speak to people differently? Like, what would an older person need versus a younger person? Like, let's talk about the action steps for that.
Absolutely. I am a huge fan of data. And so I start everything with data, right? I'm like, what are the numbers telling me? What are the facts telling me? If I look at what my current customer base is and I see that it's all people like me, then I need to start asking myself some questions. Why is that? What are the messages that who have I been targeting? Where have I been targeting, right? If I want to broaden that, then I need to do some research. A lot of times people will start with those questions and say, okay, what do older people want? What do millennials want? But if you're not part of that population, you're really just going on what you think and not on what you know. And so, there are two ways, right? There are research papers out there. There are sources that you can use to figure out, what are people looking up? What are people being drawn to? Or you can ask, right? I am a huge fan of especially using social media Hey, do you fit this population? Tell me what you like, or tell me what you don't like about what I'm offering, right? But that data is such an important first step, so that you're not just taking shots in the dark, but you are actually building based off of research and facts.
Yeah. And so it's building those relationships. And then, so as we're going in and asking those questions, because people kind of freak out when we talk about getting in the DMs and talking to people who they are not really familiar with, that don't look exactly like them, right? And so what is a good strategy for us as we move into how do we DM? What do we say? How do we do this?
Well, I really like stories on Instagram. So I like posing some questions or some polls in the stories on Instagram, and then engaging with people who have responded and answered. So that way they've already reached out and said, oh yeah, I have a thought on this. And then you are following up and saying, hey, thank you so much for, answering that poll. Would you mind if I ask you a few other questions? I mean, I will tell you personally, I do not like when someone follows me or friends me and then 2 minutes later they're in my inbox like, so tell me about your business and tell me about how you get clients. I don't like that. It's what you said earlier. It's about a relationship, right? It's about building meaningful relationship. And that relationship also needs to be mutually beneficial. You shouldn't just be talking to people because you want to sell to them. Right. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I really like some sort of, or even in your posts, right? Hey, if you want to talk to me more about this, put an emoji or send me a DM. But I like having a way where they kind of do that first reach out and then you're responding to them.
Okay. Yeah. And it's, I was talking to somebody else a little while ago, and they were saying sometimes we're just going to have to move a little bit slower, right? Because we get into this idea of business. I got to make money. I got to run. And then we just run over people because we are trying to move so fast to make money, and we don't truly build those relationships. And so what happens in network marketing is we get this revolving door, because yes, we got the people in quick, but then they go out quick because there's no true relationship and no foundation, right?
That's right.
So as you're thinking through this and thinking about this person that feels stuck, right? They really want to build a diverse team. They want to be an inclusive networker. What are 3 characteristics? What steps do you think we should take to be able to do that? So give us your wisdom on this.
Okay. So I would say for characteristics, I think that being curious, one of my personal values is I value curiosity over certainty. A lot of times as experts, we feel like we know, but I like to ask questions. Right. And so when I'm engaging with someone new, I'm asking questions, I'm getting to know them. Right. I'm leaning into that curiosity, and I'm not assuming anything. Next, I like to promote the platinum rule. Are you familiar with this? So for your listeners, it's, instead of saying that we treat others the way that we want to be treated, the platinum rule says we treat others the way they want to be treated. And so again, with, building that relationship, taking that time, finding out what are their needs? What are their wants, right? And acting accordingly. And then I think the third is really, you have to be open and transparent. This is hard work. It's difficult work. It's uncomfortable. So many people stay stuck when it comes to DEI because they don't want to push past that discomfort. It's okay to say, this is new for me. This is different. This is out of my comfort zone. It's okay. People will respond to your vulnerability. They'll respond to your transparency and honesty and openness more than you faking it till you make it. Yeah, absolutely. So as we think about, moving forward and we're thinking about how is this person now going to create this environment of inclusion, right? And so it's
it's this place where they have these diverse people that are coming onto their teams or into their businesses. And now we need the environment to be right so that they stay. And so what are some things that we can do as we're thinking about how do we make sure that this environment is truly inclusive for our team members?
So first of all, what are you representing and who are you representing? When I look at your website, do I see myself represented? When I'm looking at your social media, do I see myself represented? I'm going to tell you that it becomes glaringly obvious to someone who is different if everything you put out doesn't include anybody or anything that looks like them. So what is that visual representation that you are promoting? Again, how are you engaging and how are you celebrating the differences of your people? Instead of trying to make everyone conform to a cookie cutter version of you, how are you celebrating what makes them different and talking about it? Right? Hey, personally on my team, right? I have men, I have women, I have people who are LGBTQ, I have people who are disabled, I have people who are multilingual, and we talk about that with our clients. We let them know that everyone coming to the table is not like Beth. We have people, and we specifically we specifically recruited people who are different, because we know that we're stronger with that, right? So talking about it and celebrating it. You asked for 3. I feel like those are 2 really good steps to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I follow up on that, when we think about how are people showing this, the diversity, the inclusion on their social media? So a lot of times people run and say, oh, they said show this on my social media, and then they grab stock photos or anything that they can find and just throw it up on their social media pages. So is that okay? Like, what are we supposed to do to show the inclusion on our social media?
I think that's a great first step. I think that there are so many tools and resources out there that will allow us to show the diversity in images for our social media, but you should also be then building up the real people that you can highlight and you can show, right? I do not think it's a bad thing if you reach out to your audience and say, hey, we're trying to show more diversity. Does anyone, do you have anyone who would love to be a part of this marketing campaign that we're coming up with, right? What's in it for them? Remember, mutually beneficial, right? But again, that honesty, that transparency, we want to show off more of you. Right? We want to exhibit more of what this community looks like. And we'd love to have some of you participating in some marketing campaigns with us. Right? So I think stock photos are a great place to start, but you should be actually building up that community so that you can be showing off your real members and real partners.
Yeah, so we always say authenticity is the key, right? And so, if you have to put a photo or something like that and you're starting the process, good, but don't just continue that on and just don't fake inclusion.
And
right?
don't, I love that you said that and then don't try to change, like some people will try to change their language up and be cool, right? Like, yeah, girl, we hear you. If that was not authentic for you, it is obvious, right? So don't do that. Again, don't do what you think people want to see. You have to actually build those relationships and actually find out what people want to see from you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Beth, this has been an excellent conversation. I have absolutely loved everything that you have said. And so how do we stay in touch with you? What is your next big project? How can it help the Inclusive Networker audience? How do we stay with you?
Well, and thank you. This has been a great conversation for me, too. Something we didn't really talk about a lot today, but I am really on a journey now of helping people discover self-inclusion, which is, we talk a lot about how do you include others, but we don't talk enough about how do you foster your own sense of belonging and how do you include yourself.
Okay.
So I'm working on some things around self-inclusion. And so I would say the best way to know when that comes out is to follow me on Instagram at the Beth Ruffin, or go to my website, bethruffin.com, and sign up for the newsletter. And I will be keeping people posted about some exciting projects that we have underway.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Beth, and thank you all for listening to this episode of The Inclusive Networker. And thank you to Beth again. You are such a fabulous guest. You will find her information in the show notes, and we will see you on the next episode of The Inclusive Networker. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Inclusive Networker. You can find out all the information for our fabulous guest today in the show notes. But don't forget to subscribe to The Inclusive Networker podcast and to look out for a new episode each week on YouTube and wherever you enjoy your podcast. This is your host, Dr. Raymona. And as always, remember, I see you and I'm cheering you on. And I dare you to defy limits. See you on the next episode of The Inclusive Networker.